I remember the first day I arrived in Greenbridge Acres, a supposedly idyllic suburban community in the rolling hills of the American Midwest. Everything looked pristine: freshly cut lawns, manicured hedges, wide streets lined with maple trees that turned gorgeous shades of orange and red in the fall. My wife, Serena, and I had been searching for a place to settle with our two children, Matthew, age 12, and Bethany, age 10. We wanted peace, safety, and a sense of belonging. Our real estate agent took us on a tour, highlighting the numerous perks: a neighborhood playground, excellent public schools within walking distance, a local park with a winding creek. It was the kind of place people dreamt of living if they wanted a quiet life away from the hustle of the city. We purchased a modest yet comfortable two-story house with a well-kept front yard. At closing, we were handed an inch-thick packet of documents from the Homeowners Association, HOA. Greenbridge Acres had quite a list of rules and regulations, bylaws about fence heights, lawn maintenance schedules, even guidelines on what color one's mailbox could be. Coming from a busy urban environment, I assumed that was normal for HOAs, so I signed the papers without much fuss. Soon after we moved in, I heard rumors about a particular HOA member, an aggressively involved middle-aged woman who took enforcement to extremes. People called her Karen behind her back, though her real name was Brenda Albright. A few neighbors joked that if you left your trash bin at the curb a minute too long, you could expect a warning note from Brenda. If you dared question her authority, you'd open your mailbox to discover a notice about impending fines. At first, I shrugged it off as typical suburban lore. Every neighborhood has at least one busybody who thinks they're in charge. But over time, I would learn that Brenda wasn't merely a nuisance. She had the power to make life miserable for anyone standing in her way. More troubling, she reveled in that power, brandishing her perceived authority like a badge of honor. Not long after we settled in, Serena and I spent weekends chatting with our neighbors. We discovered that many of them lived in quiet fear of Brenda's next stunt. Random citations, questionable visits at odd hours, or official notices slip-taped to their front doors. Despite the presence of other HOA board members, Brenda had usurped most real decision-making. Some whispered that she might even be misusing HOA fees or forging new rules that nobody else had voted on. My family and I decided to remain optimistic. After all, how bad could it be? We had come here for a fresh start, and for a while, we managed to stay off Brenda's radar. It happened one warm Saturday afternoon, my first direct run-in with Brenda Albright. I was outside planting petunias in the front yard when a white SUV rolled up. Out stepped a woman in her late 40s or early 50s. She had frosted blonde hair, sharp features, and an unmistakable air of self-importance. She wore a crisp button-down shirt and black slacks, as if she were on official business. She marched up to me and barely said hello before diving into her lecture. "I'm Brenda Albright," she announced, drawing out each word. "I oversee property standards for the Greenbridge Acres HOA. I couldn't help but notice your front yard." She gestured at the petunias and the small decorative stones I was laying around them. "They look nice, don't they?" I said, trying to be friendly. We wanted something low maintenance, but colorful. Her lips pursed. "Did you know that any permanent changes to the front landscaping must be pre-approved by the HOA board?" I frowned. I read the guidelines. I believe it said for large landscaping changes, but these are just flowers. Her eyebrows arched sharply. "A flower bed can be considered a change if it alters the original aesthetic laid out by the community developer. I would advise you to submit a request form, along with photos of the changes, for HOA records. Otherwise, you might face a fine." I blinked, caught off guard. "All right," I said slowly. "I'll check the guidelines more carefully, but I wasn't aware a few petunias needed official clearance." Brenda gave a tight-lipped smile, the kind that said she believed she'd won something. "I'll drop a form in your mailbox. Make sure you fill it out." She turned on her heel and left without another word. A chill ran through me, despite the sweltering heat. This was no ordinary neighborly chat. This was Brenda's brand of intimidation. That was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, we heard similar stories from other residents: petty citations, borderline harassment for minor infractions, and the distinct impression that Brenda believed she was more than just an HOA board member. She saw herself as some kind of law enforcement figure. After that first encounter, I started noticing Brenda's white SUV rolling slowly through the neighborhood at odd hours. She had affixed a magnetic decal to her driver's side door that read, Greenbridge Acres Maintenance and Security. There was no official HOA policy about having a security patrol, especially not a single resident driving around with an imitation badge. One night, returning late from a work function, I saw her SUV parked under a street lamp, half hidden by leafy branches. The headlights were off, and from what I could see, someone was inside, watching. It was eerie, like living with an unofficial neighborhood spy. One of my neighbors, Rick Stanton, joked that Brenda must have installed night vision cameras on her house. She's got an obsession with catching people out of compliance, he said. Rick's pickup truck had earned him multiple warnings because it slightly exceeded the HOA's recreational vehicle height limit. Doesn't it bother you? I asked him one afternoon. Rick shrugged. Sure it does, but we try to pick our battles. She's known to escalate things if you resist. Fines, citations. She's even threatened to garnish wages. The rumor is she has a friend or two in the local code enforcement office who do her favors. I shook my head in disbelief. That can't be legal, can it? Who knows? Rick said. Folks around here are too afraid to push back. No one wants to spend money on lawyers. Despite the strange sense of being watched, I tried to keep my head down. My kids were enrolled in new schools. Serena was adjusting to her new job at the county library, and I had enough on my plate at work. Fighting the HOA or investigating Brenda's suspicious activities wasn't on my priority list, at least not yet. But situations like these have a way of sneaking up on you. The more you ignore a bully, the bolder they become. Greenbridge Acres hosted quarterly HOA meetings in the local community center, a bland room with folding chairs and a single podium up front. Attendance was usually lackluster. No one wanted to spend their Thursday evenings discussing lawn heights and parking restrictions. But curiosity and frustration led me to attend my first meeting about 3 months after moving in. When I arrived, I saw only about 15 other residents. Brenda sat at a table with 3 other board members, but it was clear she was the one in charge. She had a stack of folders in front of her, each labeled with the name of a homeowner who had been cited for some violation. Her posture exuded confidence, like a self-appointed judge presiding over a court. As the meeting started, she ran through a list of new security measures she was proposing. A neighborhood patrol volunteer program, with her as the coordinator, naturally. Mandatory check-ins for guests staying more than 2 nights. A new slate of fines for chronic or repeated minor violations. Many residents shuffled their feet uncomfortably. Some asked polite questions. Is this necessary? Where is the money going? Brenda waved them off with a practiced smile and jargon about preserving our community's standards. Then Rick Stanton stood up, clearing his throat. I've got a question for Ms. Albright. I've heard rumors you've been stopping cars in the neighborhood, telling people they can't park on certain streets. Is that even allowed? Brenda's eyes narrowed. I have authority from the HOA to address violations of community bylaws, she snapped. We have a serious problem with unauthorized vehicles, especially overnight. Rick pressed on. But do you have the right to physically stop someone? I saw you flagging down a driver last week. Brenda bristled. We have every right to protect our community. If I see a suspicious vehicle, I will do what's necessary to maintain safety and order. An uncomfortable murmur rippled through the room. Some residents nodded. Maybe they agreed with her heavy-handed approach. Others stared at the floor, clearly worried about crossing her. I spoke up, tentatively. Is there a formal agreement with local law enforcement regarding these actions? She spun her gaze to me. We don't need a formal agreement to enforce our bylaws. If anyone doesn't like it, they're free to move. The meeting ended without resolution. I left feeling unsettled. Brenda's sense of authority had become a personal crusade. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was acting like a police officer, or at least someone who thought she had that level of power. Over the next few weeks, rumors intensified that Brenda had started using flashing yellow lights on her SUV to appear more official. A few homeowners claimed she'd pulled up behind them if they drove too slowly or too quickly through the neighborhood, shining those lights until they pulled over. It's creepy, said my neighbor Denise, standing in her driveway one Saturday. She acts like she's law enforcement. I've even seen her wearing a badge around her neck. I raised an eyebrow. A badge? For what? Denise shrugged. She claims it's an official HOA ID, but it looks suspiciously like a security guard badge. I recalled that I used to see real security guards wearing similar badges at concerts or malls. cheap metal pieces that anyone could order online. But the fact that Brenda was using it to intimidate residents was a new level of brazenness. Another neighbor, Annie, said she'd been pulled over by Brenda near the entrance to the community. She came up to my window, demanded to see my driver's license, and asked why I didn't have a neighborhood parking sticker. I told her I was a homeowner, and she just smirked. My stomach knotted. This was all kinds of wrong, and probably illegal. But I knew from speaking with residents that complaining to local police would likely lead nowhere unless you had concrete evidence. Brenda was cunning enough to operate in the gray area. She'd claim she was just talking to a neighbor or informing them of a violation. The tension kept building, but no one seemed ready to stand up to her outright. Until, of course, she set her sights on the wrong person. A pivotal event happened one morning when I needed to drive to a nearby Army base. My cousin, Lieutenant Sarah Henderson, served in the United States Army, and she had invited my family to a special on-base ceremony. She'd just been promoted, and we were proud to witness her receiving a commendation. I took the day off work, loaded my kids into the SUV, and headed out. Serena had a shift at the library and couldn't come, but she encouraged me to take the kids to support Sarah. We left early, hoping to beat rush hour traffic. The journey took us along a stretch of highway before funneling into a Tulane County road that led to the Army base. But as fate would have it, we hit a slow-moving line of military trucks, a small Army convoy, somewhere around mile marker 114. They were probably heading to the same base for training exercises. Matthew and Bethany loved seeing the massive trucks. They peered out the windows, excitedly pointing at the camouflage vehicles. We found ourselves just ahead of the convoy after a short stop at a gas station, so they ended up following us at a moderate pace. Eventually, we turned onto another stretch of road that looped toward Greenbridge Acres from the backside, a route I rarely took. I noticed, with mild surprise, that we were again in neighborhood territory, on the far side of a newly developed sector. But that area was also under the umbrella of Greenbridge Acres. We needed to pass through a portion of the community to get to the main highway exit on the other side, leading to the base. I checked my GPS, just a 10-minute drive through these quiet streets, then onto the main interstate. The Army convoy rumbled behind us, engines humming. As I navigated a roundabout, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. My cousin was texting me a reminder about base protocols, IDs for each passenger, car registration, etc. I nudged the phone into the holder, mentally noting that everything was in the glove compartment. Suddenly, a flash of yellow lights appeared in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was part of the Army convoy, but these lights were higher up, more like a rooftop bar typically seen on tow trucks. Then I realized they were smaller, amber strobes. A white SUV was tailing me, lights blinking. I squinted. Was that Brenda's SUV? It certainly looked like the same make and model, with the magnetic maintenance and security decal on the side. She had apparently rigged it with some kind of caution lights. But why was she following me here? I glanced at the kids in the back seat. It's okay, I told them calmly, though my heart was thumping. We'll see what she wants. We weren't speeding. This street had a 25 miles per hour limit, and I was doing exactly that. No one else was around, except the Army convoy not far behind. Perhaps Brenda spotted my license plate, realized it was me, and decided to what? Pull me over for traveling through the neighborhood? I slowed down, looking for a safe place to pull aside, because she was practically on my bumper, the flashing yellows demanding my attention. The kids looked confused, and I muttered under my breath, "What is she doing?" Finally, I found a curb by a wooded area. I parked, put on my hazard lights, and rolled down the driver's side window. The Army trucks had also slowed in the distance, probably unsure why I had stopped. Brenda's SUV pulled in behind me at a slight angle, as if performing a traffic stop. My heart pounded with a mix of indignation and anxiety. Who did she think she was? Brenda stepped out, wearing black sunglasses and a small metallic badge around her neck. She walked with practiced arrogance, approaching my window as if she were a state trooper. "What's the problem, Ms. Albright?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She peered into the car, noticing the kids in the back. "I'm conducting a routine stop," she declared, words dripping with self-importance. "There have been complaints about unfamiliar vehicles cutting through our private roads." I glanced around. "These are public roads, Brenda. I'm on my way to a family event. Is there some violation?" She pressed her lips together. "Let me see your driver's license and proof of residency." My jaw nearly dropped. You can't demand that, I said, exasperated. You're not law enforcement. This is. Refusal to cooperate will be noted. She cut me off, flipping open a small notepad. I have the authority to issue community citations. You're in violation of the bylaws. My children exchanged nervous glances. Dad, Bethany whispered. I exhaled slowly, trying not to let anger consume me. Look, Ms. Albright, I'm just passing through to get to the main road. Please move your vehicle. You're blocking me. She ignored my request, leaning closer. When I ask for ID, you provide it. This is standard procedure. At that moment, I noticed movement in my side mirror. The lead army truck had come to a complete stop. Several uniformed soldiers were peering out, clearly puzzled by the scene. A standard SUV with flashing yellow lights apparently pulling over a civilian vehicle. I felt a flicker of relief. If Brenda continued to harass me, at least there were witnesses, serious, disciplined witnesses at that. Ma'am, I said firmly, this is not a legitimate traffic stop. You're impersonating an authority you do not have. I need to be on my way. She bristled. I'm not impersonating anything. I'm the head of security for Greenbridge Acres. And if you don't follow instructions, I'll have your vehicle towed. Behind us, engines rumbled. The army convoy was now forming a staggered halt on the road. I could see the lead Humvee's door open. A tall soldier hopped out and jogged toward the scene. He wore standard-issue fatigues, and his rank insignia indicated he was a staff sergeant. Brenda, absorbed in her own power trip, didn't see him coming. She was too busy glaring at me and scribbling something in her notepad. She was half leaning into my vehicle, her hand hovering near the tinted driver's side window. The staff sergeant approached cautiously. Everything okay here? He asked, voice firm but polite. Brenda whirled around, surprised. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flash across her face. Perhaps she realized that this was an actual member of the United States Armed Forces, not some random bystander. This is HOA business, Brenda declared, regaining her composure. Please stand back while I process a violation. The staff sergeant's eyebrows rose. A violation? Are you law enforcement? She lifted her fake badge. I'm head of security for this community. This driver is trespassing on private roads. Trespassing on a public thoroughfare? I said, shaking my head. These roads aren't private. The staff sergeant glanced at me, then at Brenda's badge, then at the large magnet on her SUV. A flicker of realization crossed his features. This was not a legitimate authority figure, and something was clearly off. He gestured toward the row of army trucks behind him. We've got a convoy that needs to move through here, ma'am. We're en route to Fort Greenwood for training exercises. We'd appreciate you clearing the road so we can pass. Brenda stiffened. I'll clear the road when I'm finished with this traffic stop. A second soldier approached, a lieutenant by the looks of it, having noticed the holdup. More of the convoy members peered out of their vehicles. Tension crackled in the air. The lieutenant surveyed the situation quickly. An SUV with caution lights, an irate woman brandishing a notepad, and me in my vehicle with 2 kids. Excuse me, ma'am, the lieutenant said in a calm but commanding tone. Under what authority are you conducting a traffic stop? Brenda hesitated for a split second. She probably knew it sounded ridiculous. Yet her pride refused to let her back down. HOA bylaws, she said stiffly. I'm empowered to enforce them. A flicker of confusion passed across the lieutenant's face. This is not a recognized enforcement action, he said, stepping closer. We're dealing with federal property, the army convoy. It's in everyone's interest to keep traffic flowing. Brenda must have realized that her usual intimidation tactics were losing their edge against actual military personnel. Rather than de-escalate, she doubled down. I don't care if you're the Army or the Marines, she snapped. This driver is in violation, and as soon as I issue a citation, he can be on his way. She turned back to me, scowling. Now, I need your driver's license. I simply shook my head. No, you don't, Brenda. You're not a police officer. You have no legal right to stop me. The staff sergeant exhaled, stepping between her and my window. Ma'am, if you refuse to clear the road, we'll have to contact local law enforcement to sort this out. You are not authorized to conduct traffic stops on a public street. Brenda glared at him. This is private HOA territory, not according to county maps. The lieutenant replied, crossing his arms. We're well within public easement right here. Just then, another soldier signaled to the rest of the convoy. Several trucks rumbled forward slightly, forming a semicircle around Brenda's SUV, effectively blocking her from retreating. It wasn't a hostile maneuver, more like a gentle but firm statement. We are not going anywhere, and we won't let you escalate this. My heart pounded. The kids were wide-eyed in the back, but they sensed the seriousness of the moment. I whispered to them, "It'll be okay. These soldiers are just making sure everything is under control." Brenda's eyes flicked around at the large green trucks hemming her in. She looked small, out of her depth, but her pride was a formidable force. In a last-ditch effort, she raised her voice to the lieutenant. "How dare you surround me? This is harassment." "Ma'am," he said calmly, "we're just making sure nobody's in danger here. We have a schedule to keep. Now, I'll ask you respectfully one last time. Please step aside." At that point, traffic on the other side of the street started to back up. A few civilian cars slowed to see what was happening, and someone must have dialed 911, worried about a potential confrontation. Within minutes, local police vehicles arrived, blue and red lights painting the suburban street. Two officers stepped out, eyeing the army convoy with caution. One of them recognized me. I'd met him during a local school fundraiser. "Hello, Mr. Baker," he said, a bit uneasy. "What's going on?" I explained the situation succinctly. How Brenda had pulled me over using fake security lights, demanded my license, and refused to let me leave. Meanwhile, the army convoy behind me got stuck, and tensions escalated. Brenda stomped up to the officers. "Officer, I'm in charge of HOA security, and this resident was trespassing. I have every right to enforce our bylaws." The older police officer gave Brenda a skeptical look. "Ma'am, HOA bylaws do not allow you to impersonate police or stop vehicles on a public road." "I wasn't impersonating the police," she snapped, pointing to the badge on her neck. "This is my identification as head of security." The second officer, a younger man, asked, "And where did you get that badge exactly?" She turned red. "That's irrelevant. I have full authority from the HOA board to act in a security capacity for Greenbridge Acres." The older officer rubbed his forehead, clearly tired of her nonsense. "Ma'am, you can't detain someone for a so-called bylaw violation. That's not how it works. If you have a complaint, you file it through proper channels, code enforcement, or civil court if needed. But forcibly pulling someone over and demanding ID crosses a line." "It's not forced," she spat back. He chose to stop. I threw my hands up in frustration. "Because you were tailgating me with flashing lights. My kids are in the car. I didn't want to risk an accident." The police officers exchanged glances, and the older one turned to the staff sergeant. "Sergeant, we apologize for the inconvenience to your convoy." The staff sergeant nodded. "Just doing our job, sir. We needed to ensure our route was clear. We appreciate your patience. We'll handle it from here." The officer replied, then looked at Brenda. "Ma'am, we'll have to ask you to remove those lights and cease any attempts to conduct traffic stops immediately. If you continue, we may have to arrest you for impersonating law enforcement." Brenda's face contorted with fury, but for once, she seemed speechless. I thought that might be the end of it, that Brenda would back down. But she had tasted too much power to give up easily. Over the next week, she plastered the neighborhood with flyers claiming the local police attacked her while she was diligently performing her community duty. She twisted the incident to make it seem like I had lured the army convoy into the neighborhood, causing a public safety hazard. Absurd as it sounded, some residents believed her or at least feared her enough to feign agreement. She chaired an emergency HOA meeting to discuss rising crime rates and the infiltration of outside vehicles. Of course, she singled me out as a troublemaker. I was furious. Not only had she harassed me in front of my children, but now she was weaponizing the HOA's platform to smear my name. I decided to gather evidence of her misconduct, photographs, witness statements, and hopefully some official documentation that she had no legitimate law enforcement affiliation. During this time, I discovered that Rick Stanton had quietly filmed part of that traffic stop from his front porch. The video showed Brenda's SUV with flashing yellow lights, her stepping out with the fake badge, and me in my car with two kids. It also showed the army convoy surrounding her. That footage was gold, unmistakable proof of her impersonation attempts. Then, an anonymous tip arrived in my mailbox. Someone had dropped off a file that included copies of canceled checks made out to Brenda Albright, security consultation, apparently taken from the HOA's budget. It seemed Brenda was paying herself for her security services without official board approval. Also enclosed were receipts for the badge, lights, and a uniform shirt, which I hadn't yet seen her wear. My blood boiled. She was siphoning HOA funds for personal use and masquerading as an authority figure. This wasn't just a neighborhood squabble, it was outright fraud. Armed with the video and the financial documents, I approached several neighbors who had also suffered under Brenda's rule. Rick Stanton, Denise, Annie, and a few others formed a small coalition. We needed a strategy. Going directly to the police might help, but we also feared that, without enough evidence of broader wrongdoing, they might treat it as just another petty HOA dispute. So, we planned to confront the entire HOA board at the next meeting. We'd present the evidence publicly in front of other homeowners, forcing them to acknowledge Brenda's misconduct. After that, we could get the police involved for any potential criminal charges. The day of the meeting arrived. Word got around that something big was about to happen, so attendance tripled. People crammed into the community center, whispering and glancing at Brenda, who sat up front with her usual arrogant posture. When the meeting began, Brenda wasted no time painting a dire picture of criminal infiltration, urging homeowners to vote for expanded HOA security powers. She even proposed buying an official-looking vehicle for patrols at the HOA's expense. That's when Rick raised his hand. "I have a question for Ms. Albright," he said loudly. "Is it true you've been using HOA funds for your personal security ventures? Because we have the receipts." Brenda froze. Her eyes darted around the room. "What are you talking about?" I stood up. "We have evidence. Canceled checks from the HOA account to you personally, plus receipts for the lights and badge you used. And we also have a video showing you impersonating law enforcement." Murmurs spread through the audience. A few board members looked shocked, others looked fearful. Brenda's face reddened. "That's not impersonation. I have the right to protect this community." Rick played the short video clip on his tablet. There was no mistaking what it showed. Brenda stopping me, demanding my ID, wearing a fake badge, and getting surrounded by an army convoy. The crowd gasped. As it ended, the board's vice president cleared his throat. "Brenda, is this video real? Did you attempt a traffic stop?" She stammered. I had to stop him from trespassing. The army convoy was interfering with community roads." Her words did more harm than good. The board members exchanged troubled glances. The audience erupted in questions. "You pulled him over with kids in the car? That's illegal. Who gave you that authority?" Desperate, Brenda grabbed her gavel and slammed it. "Order! Order! I am the security head here, and we will not entertain these false accusations any further." But the momentum had shifted. The board wasn't cowed by her usual tactics. This time, the evidence was public. The vice president of the HOA finally spoke up. "Due to these serious allegations and the evidence we've seen, I move to immediately suspend Ms. Albright from her position on the board, pending an internal investigation." A thunderous applause erupted from the audience. Brenda pounded the gavel again, yelling, "You can't do that. I'm the one who keeps this place safe. You're all turning against me." But the board members had had enough. The vote was swift, nearly unanimous to suspend her. Brenda was outraged, her face twisted in disbelief. "I've given everything to this community," she shouted as security volunteers, the real ones, hired from a legitimate company for big meetings, gently escorted her away from the podium. It could have ended there, with her simply ousted from the HOA. But the story was far from over. The coalition of neighbors, along with the new acting board, forwarded the financial documents and video evidence to the local district attorney's office. Fraud, misappropriation of funds, and impersonating law enforcement were no minor matters. Within a week, the district attorney announced a formal investigation. Subpoenas went out, bank records were combed through, and depositions were scheduled. Rumors of Brenda's prior record in another neighborhood surfaced, suggesting this wasn't the first time she'd meddled in an HOA. As the legal gears turned, we discovered more disturbing facts. Brenda had used threats of fines to squeeze money from residents, claiming they needed to pay her directly for security upgrades. Some had complied out of fear. She'd also forged signatures on certain bylaws that gave her near-dictatorial power over community enforcement. The final blow came when local police reopened the incident with me and the army convoy. They interviewed the staff sergeant, the lieutenant, and even the soldiers who witnessed her attempt at a traffic stop. Their statements corroborated the video footage, painting a clear picture of impersonation. When the district attorney indicted Brenda on multiple charges, impersonating a law enforcement official, fraud, misuse of HOA funds, and harassment, the entire neighborhood let out a collective sigh of relief. She was arrested in her own driveway, ironically the same place she used to stand guard, scanning for violators. That day, my phone lit up with messages from neighbors, many of whom I barely knew. They thanked me and Rick for exposing the truth. A few joked about how the Army convoy had played an unwitting yet heroic role, making Brenda's theatrics impossible to deny. The trial that followed was a local media sensation. Headlines read, HOA enforcer accused of impersonating police and misusing funds. Reporters ate it up. Suburban drama that hinted at deeper societal issues of power and corruption in homeowners associations. Brenda, for her part, showed no remorse. She testified in court that she genuinely believed she had the right to enforce community bylaws by any means necessary. She whined that the neighborhood was ungrateful for her hard work. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution played the video of the Army incident for the jury, highlighting the SUV lights, the fake badge, and her demands for my license. They also displayed copies of checks she wrote to herself from the HOA account. Her defense tried to paint it all as a misunderstanding, that she was overzealous but not criminal. However, the jury disagreed. They found her guilty on multiple counts: impersonating a law enforcement officer, fraud and embezzlement of HOA funds, harassment, and false reporting. She had lodged bogus complaints about the Army convoy. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge delivered the sentence: 2 years in a state correctional facility, plus full restitution to the HOA. Furthermore, the judge ordered the seizure of her property if she failed to repay the misappropriated funds. Brenda looked stunned, as if she couldn't believe her grand empire had come crashing down. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried to ask her questions, but she kept her head down, refusing to speak. With Brenda gone, the HOA underwent a massive restructuring. The board elected a new president, an even-tempered retiree who believed in transparency and fairness. They repealed many of Brenda's draconian rules and removed the so-called security fee from the budget. Neighbors started to relax. It was as if a dark cloud had lifted. People finally felt they could walk their dogs, park their cars, plant flowers, and decorate their porches without fear of petty citations. A wave of neighborly cooperation replaced the old climate of suspicion. I felt a personal sense of relief, too. My kids no longer worried about being stopped in the street while riding their bikes. Serena said she could read quietly on our front porch without feeling the eyes of that white SUV creeping by. Even small improvements, like the new playground equipment, seemed like steps toward a healthier community. We had come to Greenbridge Acres seeking peace, and for a while, it seemed we'd found the opposite. But sometimes, adversity can bring people together. The neighbors who once kept to themselves started to form genuine friendships. We had block parties, potlucks, and volunteer days. There was a renewed sense of ownership in the community, real ownership, not the fear-laden version Brenda had pushed. It became something of a local legend. The day the HOA Karen pulled someone over and got surrounded by an Army convoy. People told the story half in disbelief, half in amusement. The Army soldiers who had been there probably shared it around their base, too, describing how a suburban tyrant tried to boss them around. My cousin, Lieutenant Sarah Henderson, laughed when she heard the details. She'd been inside the base during the incident, but she knew the staff sergeant who responded. He reportedly told her, "That lady thought we'd just roll over because she flashed some lights at a civilian's car. She had no idea who she was messing with." The moral of the story was clear: arrogance and abuse of power can carry you only so far. When reality catches up, especially with unstoppable evidence, your house of cards collapses. For Brenda Albright, her entire identity was built upon controlling others. Once exposed, she was left with nothing but legal troubles and a tarnished name. For the rest of us, life went on, better than before. The new HOA board was more reasonable, the neighbors felt safer, and the fiasco with Brenda had taught everyone an invaluable lesson. Never let one individual wield so much unchecked power. About a month after Brenda's conviction, I received a surprise visit. Two soldiers from the same convoy, Staff Sergeant Morales and Lieutenant Darlington, showed up at my door, smiling politely. They were making rounds in the area to thank local residents who had cooperated with their training route. "We just wanted to say we appreciate how calm you were during that bizarre incident," said Lieutenant Darlington. "And your video and testimony helped clarify things for the local police." I invited them in for coffee, and we chatted for a while. They admitted that many people on base had heard about the fake HOA cop. Some found it amusing. Others saw it as a cautionary tale about civilian impersonation. Staff Sergeant Morales chuckled, sipping his coffee. "When we saw those yellow lights behind you, we assumed it was just a community security guard cautioning traffic for the convoy. But once we noticed her stepping out like a traffic cop, we knew we had to check." I thanked them for intervening. It had undoubtedly prevented Brenda from escalating matters further. That day reaffirmed my gratitude for our men and women in uniform, ready to help even when the threat is just a power-crazed HOA member. Months stretched into a year, and eventually, news trickled in about Brenda's life behind bars. She'd lost her home, confiscated to repay the stolen HOA funds. Rumor had it that some extended family offered to take her in after her release, but nobody expected her back in Greenbridge Acres anytime soon. When I reflect on everything that happened, it still feels surreal. Who would have guessed that a suburban homeowner association could host such a dramatic showdown? Yet, beneath the neat lawns and flower beds, real tensions can simmer, especially when someone with an overblown ego seizes power. Ironically, the same sense of community that Brenda tried to exploit became the force that united us against her. People banded together, discovered their voices, and decided they wouldn't live in fear any longer. The result was a neighborhood that truly belonged to its residents, not to an overbearing HOA official. As for me, I continued my life in Greenbridge Acres, focusing on family and work. Every now and then, I passed the spot where Brenda had pulled me over, recalling the surreal image of her SUV pinned in by a line of army trucks. The memory served as a reminder that no matter how powerful someone believes they are, there's always a greater force capable of stopping them, especially when they're in the wrong. And so ends the tale of the fake HOA security officer who overplayed her hand in front of the wrong people and paid a hefty price. The day she flicked on those lights behind my vehicle, she had no idea that an entire army convoy was trailing us, ready to step in. In that moment, her carefully crafted facade crumbled for all to see. Justice was served. The community healed and rebuilt. I couldn't ask for a better outcome. The day after Brenda was taken into custody, an emergency HOA meeting was convened to discuss future policies and the appointment of a new board member to fill her seat. Residents voted almost unanimously for stricter oversight on HOA finances and a ban on single-person security patrols. Over time, any sign of the old intimidation tactics vanished. No more petty citations slipped under doors. No more suspicious white SUV prowling at all hours. The local police started patrolling the main roads more frequently, fostering a healthier relationship with residents. Greenbridge Acres became what it was meant to be from the start. A safe, pleasant place where people looked out for one another without fear. We began hosting monthly block parties. Kids played in cul-de-sacs without fear of a citation. Adults formed walking groups in the evenings, greeting each other warmly. Every once in a while, someone brought up Brenda's name in a nostalgic laugh. "Remember when we had that insane Karen who tried to arrest a guy with an army convoy behind him?" But mostly, people preferred focusing on the present, a cooperative, thriving neighborhood finally at peace. In the end, the streets of Greenbridge Acres still look the same: manicured lawns, tidy houses, colorful flower beds. But the spirit has changed. Now, there's unity, openness, and a shared resolve to never let one individual dominate through fear again. If Brenda ever steps foot in our neighborhood upon release, she'll find a place much different from the one she left. A community that knows its own power and won't bow to false authority. After all we went through, we learned a crucial lesson. If someone tries to pull you over with a fake badge and intimidation, stand your ground and keep your eyes on the rearview mirror. You never know who might be behind you, ready to step in and reveal the truth.